Hi, I'm Todd Dunn from CCTV. During this episode of News You Can Use, we're going to talk about the Historic Marker Program. Markers found all across Charlotte County. The markers signify everything from historic home sites to nearly forgotten cemeteries and the history of actual working facilities still around today, like the Punta Gorda Airport, where we are. Here to tell us more about some of the history of this airport during World War II is Dr. Eric Carlson, Associate Professor of History at Florida Gulf Coast University. Yes. Well, tell us about the role Punta Gorda Airport played during World War II.
Well, briefly, the United States military needs hundreds of thousands of pilots in 1942, when the United States had just entered World War II a month before in December of 1941. They have to build hundreds and hundreds of these bases around the United States. Florida is a great place for pilot training because of the great weather. Florida is basically a coastal plain, so it's flat. So this is an ideal spot. Before World War II began in December of 1941, the Army Air Corps had some training bases already in Florida, just a few. But when the war begins, they have to build hundreds of these bases, trains hundreds of thousands of pilots, and they go throughout the state of Florida picking sites. They pick this site, they pick a couple sites in Fort Myers, Naples, Arcadia has two bases, Carlstrom Field and Dorr Field. The base that is developed here in Punta Gorda is a fighter training field. It began construction in 1942, and by the next year, 1943, it is up and going. And in early 1944, the first class of student pilots get here. And they train in P-40 Warhawks, which is a fighter aircraft. It can also be used in a fighter bomber role. And then eventually in 1945, they bring in P-51 Mustangs, which is a bigger, more powerful fighter and fighter bomber aircraft. Okay. So in 15 weeks, they're taught how to fly this aircraft in fighter roles and fighter bomber roles. And they fly all around this area. They hop to different bases. They go up north, they go up south, they go out, do long distance flying and training. Mm-hmm. After 15 weeks, they are graduated from that program and they're sent to a combat squadron.
Neat. Punta Gorda and bases like this really had a big influence on the future population of us.
They do. Ultimately, after the war, the base is deactivated, but in the post-World War II period, the United States grows. In the 50s, 40s and 50s, you have the baby boom. In this area of the country, two things to make it inhabitable, that's air conditioning and spraying for insects. And in the 60s, 70s, 80s, all the way to today, this population explodes. Today, Florida is I think it's the third most populous state in the Union. Many of the men that went and were trained at this base decided to come back after the war to live in this area. And some of them, 30 years later, decide to retire here. So you have a lot of those returning veterans, so it's a special story.
Awesome. Well, thank you for giving us a little bit of this information. That was perfect. Okay. Now what we're going to do is learn more about the Historic Marker Program. We're joined by the historian of the Charlotte County Historical Center, Annette Snap. Thank you for joining us. Tell us a little bit more about the Historic Marker Program that we have in our county.
The Marker Program is something that is overseen by the Historical Advisory Committee. And what it is we look for locations throughout the county where we can put markers up for people to come visit and learn more about the history of the county. Right now, what we're working on this is number 18 here at the Punta Gorda Army Airfield that we did in collaboration with the Airport Authority.
You always have to have a collaboration. And how do these markers come about? How can someone get a historical marker?
The program is one that is really driven by the Historical Advisory Committee. So when somebody has an idea for a location, they connect up with the Historical Advisory Committee, and it's that committee that steers the application process. An application needs to be submitted that has information on that history for the location and why it's important to mark it and tell people about it forever.
You have several of these, like you mentioned, and more to come. How do people find out where these markers are located?
We have an interactive map that you can find online, and on that you can see where the locations are. When you click on them, you get more information about what you can find there. We've got them spread across the county. Again, as you say, we have more in the works to tell not only the history of Punta Gorda, but of other locations, of Englewood, of the cattle industry, all aspects of the history of Charlotte County.
Well, thank you very much for joining us and filling us in on some of the history and the markers. If you'd like to find more information about the markers and where they are and see that interactive map, you can go to charlottecountyfl.gov. Reporting for CCTV, I'm Todd Dunn.